Oakland, and I was her campaign manager. So I actually have two questions. I'm wondering if you can explain the spoilage that you spoke about. I was under the impression that if you only ranked one and didn't participate in 2 or 3, that your vote still counted for that one. So what does spoilage mean? And I have a second question.
Well, when I use spoilage, in like say comparing that June 2012 election, which was a vote for one election for the top 2 primary, versus the spoilage in the November 2010 open mayor's race, is a ballot that couldn't count at all in that election because of an overvote. So people who made a mistake that you could not be able to register a vote for that person, so that they voted for 2 people or more in that June 2012 primary, or they ranked people in such a way that there were 2 rankings on the first choice row, or they skipped and then they ranked 2 people on the second choice row. There just wasn't a clear first choice ranking.
And I would say that kind of thing happens in traditional elections too. In the city of Minneapolis, and so I don't know if your automated solution works the same way, but we now can control for someone who makes a mistake. So there are things that you may do where you don't know, was this the voter's choice, or they just forgot to rank 2 and 3. I mean, because it could be either one, right? But an overvote is something you can't do. In Minneapolis, with our voting technology now, it would actually beep, and you would have an option to refill out your ballot, so that you really are making a conscious choice if you choose, I'm just not going to fill this out properly.
And I will say that just to emphasize that there were 10 times as many overvotes in that top 2 vote for one simple ballot than there were in the RCV ballot. And the overvote rates are extremely low in election after election. I think in Minneapolis, the number of votes that ultimately were not able to be counted was like less than 0.1% or something. You know, like they really almost
Interact with a lot of voters on this campaign, and sometimes the best way for me to explain to them how ranked choice worked was in a really visual way, and showing that, you know, when you remove the 7th candidate, for example, the votes get split based on what the person, you know, you guys know the process. But I don't know if there's a video that could be created to help define that. I don't know if that's going to reach our most disengaged or you know, our voters that may not have access to technology, but I think a visual way of breaking it out would be better. I did a lot of charts and showed people on paper at their doorstops, and once they saw the numbers, once they saw it visually, they claimed to understand it a little bit better. But just one anecdote.
We, on the City of Minneapolis website, I just was doing a little search. You can kind of pull up some of the historical information. There was a video that was created that's a short video that explains the process. So it explains both how the counting works and that kind of a thing. We also, a popular image that was used both in the city's materials and then some of the advocacy groups was this comparison to what happened in the Ireland election. If folks have seen that graph where the person who had the most first place votes on the first round didn't reach 50%. And then once you looked at the second and third place votes and they were redistributed, then you had a different winner than who got the most first place votes. And it shows it in it's just like a little box, and it's a really great graphic that we've used a lot in Minneapolis. So.
Frederick Roots, I am a director of field for Brian Parker's campaign for mayor of Oakland. And my question is simply, what is some quick verbiage that I can talk to a voter about when they're expressing trepidation with ranked choice voting? You know, specifically, they've experienced the election before, and now they're turned off, and they don't want to engage.
Sure. So I think one of the experiences that we've had is actually that people aren't turned off by the process; they're turned off by the outcome. And so I think it's really important for us to separate out the process of voting and the process of governing, because they're not the same. And our experience is that people have questions not just about the mayor, but about every elected official. That public official ratings are pretty low. People aren't crazy about the way that our country and city and state are being run. And so I really feel like a conversation the conversations that we have at Oakland Rising are really to talk with folks about what it means when more people are participating. Because that's why we supported it, right? Like we are all about democracy, but we really want to make sure our folks are included in that vision of democracy. And so when we talk with folks about the fact that more people are able to come out and vote, like more people on your block, let me actually pull back for a second. So I don't know if this is known, but we know for a fact that in June primaries, whiter, wealthier, more educated people turn out to vote. That's who votes. Older, thank you, that's right, and older, but I want to be ageist. We know that in November elections, more people of color, more immigrant folks, more kind of non-traditional, which is older, whiter, wealthier, and then more male, people are voting. And so we fundamentally have a different demographic participating if we have that election in November. When it comes to ranking votes, I think that there was I remember the first round we did in 2010, there was all kinds of crazy. It was like, rank me every single line in 3, so there was confusion coming from candidates. Candidates were confusing people about how the process worked. And so I think one thing is to just make it clear. You have 3 rankings. You get to rank who you want to support first, second, and third. You like somebody else better than you like us? Great. Rank us second. You like 2 people better than us? Great. Rank us third. I think to the point that Elizabeth is making and that Rob is making, you just need as many votes as you can get. It's not about whether or not someone puts you first or second. So I think when we're talking with folks, it's telling them you have three opportunities to decide who you want to vote for. The one thing that we do talk with folks about is be strategic with it. You don't, it means that you can vote for the person you really like the most first. You don't have to vote for the person you think is going to win first. Because if that person loses, they get to roll out. That vote goes to their number 2 choice. So in traditional elections, what usually happens, you're it's a primary, it's either this person or this person is going to win, let me vote for the winner. Let me put my hat behind somebody so I can get behind them in the general. In this process, people can really vote with their hearts, with their conscience, I really like the Green candidate. I really like what the Greens stand for. The Greens are not going to win the mayoral race, but I really like what they stand for. Let me put this person first, right? So I think it shifts what is possible. And I think to talk to voters, I hope all of the people who are working for candidates can be talking to voters in an inspirational way. People want to be inspired by their government. They want an Obama. Everybody wants that. But when we aren't really clear about how systems work, when we're not clear about how ranked choice voting can lift up democracy, we end up sending a bad message about the process, and it ends up sending a bad message about the candidate. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Question for Elizabeth. I understand in the recent city council races, there were not only were there a lot of new incumbents, but a lot of new faces from different communities. First Hmong community candidate was elected, Somali candidate was elected. Was that? So how did that happen? What was going on in those communities? The type of mobilization, and how did ranked ballots? Did the candidates try to use ranked ballots in any way to facilitate coalition building? And just if you talk a little bit about the change that came to the city council in that way, because it was unprecedented, wasn't it? I don't think it'd been all white before that.
It wasn't all white, but this is the I think, well, part of the story is that these were 3 firsts, from communities that had not seen a representative in a position of this level. And to have that happen, to form that coalition. And the other thing I will say is for these candidates to win, clearly they needed to have a coalition that went beyond kind of their own ethnic group. So they were really out there with a message about this one Minneapolis, which I will say was the mayor's message, but a lot of candidates picked this up as well. It just was a very popular message. The Hmong candidate who won, his name is Guang Yang, and his race, I think, was one of the most interesting races in the city. Both maybe because for 2 reasons. One is he is from a ward that has been traditionally the lowest turnout ward in the city. It is a ward that has the most concentration of poverty. It is a ward that is most heavily African American. So it was unusual for a lot of reasons that he won. There were 3 robust candidates in this ward. that were active, that were on the street, that were campaigning. And what was interesting is that I think Blong was a very independent candidate. He kind of said, I don't care about your endorsement, DFL party, I don't care about, he was just out there and he just pounded the pavement. And I think you really saw what happened when someone went out and they worked and they worked and they worked. And he also, I will say though, he had gained a little bit of profile because he ran for county commissioner the year before and he lost. So in his race, he ended up, traditionally this has been the lowest turnout ward. It was not this year. It was not the lowest turnout ward. So he and the other candidates inched up the turnout. And there was a lot of questions about how would voters utilize their rankings in this race, and they ranked at very high levels. You were able to see a lot of voters ranked 3 candidates, and if they didn't rank 3, they ranked 2, which again I think just shows the robustness of the race in that particular ward. So,
let me just add a story from St. Paul, where they also had a Hmong American one. There, by the way, Jim, they allow 6 rankings in St. Paul. That's an example of a place where they do. But this was a special election for city council, and a lot of candidates were running. There were 2 Hmong candidates, which could have been a split vote problem. It's a very diverse board. SEIU decided to endorse 2, and that was unusual to, sort of showing that they were embracing the ranked choice voting culture. And those 2 candidates actually ended up being the final 2. One was African American, one was the Hmong American. When it was interesting is the Hmong American, after winning, then picked this person to be their chief of staff. So kind of showing that they competed hard, and it was actually really close, but they also had a relationship that they could still pursue that.
A different topic that is of interest to me is there are a lot of complaints about the candidates forums, that without a runoff process that the voter does not get to compare the candidates in a deeper way. And my question for Elizabeth is, it sounds like you've sort of written off the candidates forums as a significant way to compare candidates, and I'm wondering if there's any creative ideas around that.
well, that was exactly what I was going to say. Is I think. I mean, it's up to us, right, about how creative some of these formats can be while still presenting a fair structure that gives those participants a fair opportunity to participate in the forum. So I think sometimes, I guess my criticism and what I saw in Minneapolis is we just had a lot of formats that were very similar and didn't really give the candidates a good opportunity to kind of break out of, okay, here's one question, we're going to have 7 candidates. Okay, so that's a little bit of how you have what's a design structure, and that creates just a little bit of difference, or gives a little bit more opportunity to the candidates to say something so that they can show a little bit more of themselves and their personality or how they feel on certain issues. So I think it can be done. I think the league, though, because you're so good at coming up with what are those rules, because this is a big point to candidates. They want to feel like the opportunity is fair. So, I mean, that's the challenge. But I do think there can be creative things that we do. I organized a forum that was very early in the season for the mayoral candidates. It was it was an unusual place. So it was sort of like in the round in a really informal church. And so it was all these like couches, and the candidates had to stand up in the middle. And it actually gave them an opportunity to think about their body posture and those kinds of things. And it was a little bit different. And people remarked on that, I swear, for months. So sometimes just that little bit of difference can help the candidates also perform and also give the audience something different that engages them.